Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is part 2 of literally seeing how f-stops affect your image. Instead of just saying, hey, you go from f11 to f16 and it compresses the background, or there's less compression and you can see more, you can see less, it's best to just show you so you can see exactly what's going on. So in part 1, well, if you didn't see part 1, click on Kermit's nose or something, or eyes or whatever, and it will take you to part 1 where you actually see me shooting these pictures and explaining what's going on while we do that. So let's look at this first picture. We're looking at the f-stop. It was shot at f1.4. I was focused right here on Kermit's eye, and at 1.4 you have to get your focus tack sharp or it won't be in focus somewhere right here. You can see that this is out of focus. This eye is out of focus. The only place in focus in this photo at 1.4 is on Kermit's eye because of the shallow depth of field. You can see that the background is blurring out. So what is going on is your aperture is wide open. That means it's letting in really quickly letting in a lot of light. So to compensate for that, the shutter speed has to be much faster. When the shutter speed's faster and your aperture is wide open, the light from a distance doesn't have enough time to come in and expose or lay down any detail on the film plane, or in this case, on your image sensor. So what's happening is because it's such a fast shutter speed and you're so wide open that you're only going to get your focus where you wanted it. The depth of field doesn't come into play. But conversely, on the opposite angle at f16, look what happened to the shutter speed. It's 1/50th of a second. It's much slower. So all the extra detail from the background gets to fill in because the shutter isn't opening and closing so fast that it can't see this tree back here. And that's why it's totally blown out at 1.4, but at 16, you can see that both eyes are in focus. You can see that his nose is in focus, and that the background has really started to come into play. So let's go back to the beginning. This is 1.4. And even though this isn't about shutter speeds, just look at what happens to the shutter speeds up here when we change our aperture. So the shutter speed totally dropped. It got much slower. Because now we're at f2.8, we went up a couple stops. I skipped a whole bunch of stops in there just to go to 2.8. But you can see the difference here. The background, you can't even recognize what's there. You can start to recognize that this is a tree, and then these are just some blurry things in the background. But you can also see that this eye's more in focus, and this eye's in focus now. So now there's more depth. When you're shooting at wide open angles, you have to be very careful when you shoot groups and things like that, because if a person is here and the other person is here, one's going to be in focus and the other isn't. So that's important to think about when you're shooting weddings also, because many times the bride and the groom aren't on the same plane and you want them both to be in focus. So let's move up. Now we're going to go to f4. So look at this. Again, 12/50th of a second at 2.8, jump to 1/800th of a second at f4. So we're letting in less light using the f-stop, but the camera, the shutter speed has to slow down to compensate for not letting in as much light. So look how the background's starting to come into play. It's getting more into focus. His nose is getting more into focus as it starts to creep down here. The focus plane's starting to expand. That's what's going to happen. That's why when Ansel Adams shot at f64, everything was in focus from front to back. Just think of this, it expands. Your focus expands. Your depth of field, your field of preview, everything expands as your f-stops go higher. As they get smaller, everything gets compressed. So less focus. That's why when you see those macro shots where you can literally see the bead of focus going straight across, but everything out in front of it and in back of it is out of focus. So now we're at f5.6. So here's 4, here's 5.6, here is f8. You can see that you can now recognize everything in the background. f11 all the way to f16. So look at that. You can't even see that there's actually a street here. There's a street running through, but I guess at the angle that I'm at, you can't even tell that. So I hope you see what's going on here. We're just going backwards. You can see how it gets blurrier and blurrier as we start to compress the background and drop our aperture from f16 all the way to 1.4. Again, here's 1.4, 2.8, then we go to 4, 5.6, f8, f11, and f16. Look at this. Everything is in focus. His tongue, you know, all the way down to here is in focus. And on the other side, it's not. So just play around with these settings. Just by looking at this stuff on the screen and seeing what's happening with your shutter speed, even though this is more about aperture, just start to get the feel for when you let more light in, what's going to happen with your shutter speed. It goes up. When you let less light in, your shutter speed is going to go down because it has to compensate for a smaller opening. It's letting in less light. But as you shrink down, you're expanding the depth that's going on in your image. All right, now it's time for the special announcement. But actually, before I get to that, some people said, Jared, doesn't the focal length affect the bokeh, affect how much out of focus area there is? Or doesn't the distance between you and the subject, the camera and the subject, affect how the background's going to be? Along with, if you're shooting DX versus FX, there's differences in how the bokeh or depth of field is going to be perceived. But, you know, instead of me showing, like, everything, yes, that is true. Different focal lengths are easier to blow out the background. When you shoot a longer focal length, like a 70 to 200, and you shoot it out at 200, and you're close to your subject, that background's going to blow out much easier. But if you're using, say, an 11 to 16 Tokina or a 14 to 24 Nikon, and you're shooting a whole scene, even at 2.8, the background isn't really going to blow out, because the wider angles, the wider you shoot, the less compression you have. The longer the focal length, the more compression you have. But that brings us up to the special announcement, which is this. It's time to announce assignments. Now, I'm not sure if they're going to be monthly. I'm not going to be sure if they're bi-monthly yet, but this is assignment number 1. I would like you guys to go out and photograph with different lenses, different focal lengths, run through each aperture of your lens. You know, well, not the third stop increments, but if it's a 2.8, go 2.8, f4, do it in one stop increments, and let's see what you get. Some people get close to your subjects, other people stay further back. Some people shoot with wider lenses. Some of you guys get really close with wider lenses. In this way, we're going to get everybody's input, and they're going to post it in the assignment section under assignment number 1 in the Frono's photo forum, which you can get the link for below or in the post on the website. This is the new section. This is where we're going to put up different assignments so that everybody can learn from everybody else. Be sure to post your photos and how you took them in that section. So I want to know what lens you used. How far were you away from the subject? You know, simple things like that. You don't really have to worry too much about editing. I mean, I would still shoot raw. I would tweak your files, I guess, and then you could put them into a Flickr photo gallery and put the link up in the forum, or you could just upload those photos in the forum. But this way, we get to see what everybody does, and we can learn from it. So we can see somebody shooting with a 24mm lens. We can see somebody shooting with a 200mm lens and start to get a feel for how the different millimeters will affect the different out-of-focus areas in the background. Or somebody's really close to a subject versus somebody really far away from a subject. This way, we're learning from each other. We're seeing what everybody is doing, and just, you're going to learn much quicker this way. And that's why, you know, I'm not showing you every little step of the way that, hey, here's what's going to look like if I'm too far away from the subject. Here's what it's going to look like if I'm close to the subject, like I am here with Kermit. But, you know, this is going to be really good. So that is the assignment section. Assignment number 1 is go out and photograph an object, or it could be a tree, it could be whatever, and run through the different apertures. Run through all the different stops in one-stop increments, and then post it in the Frono's photo forum under the assignment section for assignment number 1, and then it's going to be really cool. So I look forward to bringing you guys assignments and seeing what you guys come up with, because this really is the best way to learn. For me, it's the best way to learn, is to literally see what's going on, and, you know, that's why it's important that you guys put your information up for how you did it, and the lens, the shutters. Well, we'll see all that information if you can save it out of Lightroom or however with all the information in it. So that is it. I hope you like this super secret project for the apertures. I'm sure we'll revisit it later on in more detail. But now, let's see what you guys do with this assignment. Thank you very much. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya!